Standardize the leave cash-in process, where there may be a maximum leave amount. Handle those maximum leave amounts in the same manner across the municipality. Gain some greater consistencies with the provisions as it relates to longer-term absences. Examples of those would be personal leave without pay, education leave without pay, military leave with pay, without medical leave without pay, and the Family Medical Leave or Alaska Family Leave Act. Consistency with the shorter term absences related to blood donation, jury duty, and court leave. Moving to the next slide, talking about FLSA overtime complexities. These are just simply examples to show some of our contracts. Call for 2 time for all overtime, 2 time for certain days off, 1.5 times outside of the regular scheduled work shift, and then you have different definitions on how certain holidays are and are not paid across the municipality. We also have what's called call-in and callbacks. That's what I would call the guaranteed inconvenience, being called into work. They're inconsistent across labor unions. Some are between 2 hours and 5 hours. There's a variety of options there. And there are some unions that don't address the differences at all. And the last slide here is just really a picture of what has been presented as just the future, the sustainability of labor costs. It talks about the increases of labor costs. The F, if you look at the line item at the bottom, the F is related to I can't remember what that is. The B is the budgeted amount. This was from, I believe, one of the budget slides that had been included in the 6-year plan.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, you guys. That concludes the PowerPoint presentation. We're ready for questions.
What I'm going to do, Assembly members, is I'm starting with Ms. Osiander. And Ms. Osiander, I'm going to give you Mr. Clean and back. So we're just going to work our way through.
Not sure I know where to start. I do. I got a call. I'll start with a specific phone call I got yesterday from an exempt employee with longevity who was concerned when he saw the proposed reduction. Now, when you say in here that longevity is grandfathered in, would that also be true for exempt employees?
Yes, it is, and it's actually in 330, I want to say 126 is where we deal with longevity and service recognition. Okay. And it's been grandfathered in.
All right. The ERP will become a lot more powerful if this is enacted, yet basically this calls for the ERP to be appointed by the mayor. Did you consider any kind of independent appointments for the ERP?
Actually, I would disagree with you on both accounts. The ERB is, we haven't changed either of those provisions. The ERB has always, and they were very active about 15 years ago,
okay,
of dealing with unfair labor practices and clarifying bargaining units. You know, their other main job is certifying bargaining units. Recently, in the plumbers negotiations, mediation fact finder, they were actually bypassed. The parties agreed to a mediator and a fact finder, but their job, their role has not changed. And as for the ERB, it is a 3-member commission. The mayor appoints 1 member. The labor unions appoint another member, and those 2 members get together and appoint a neutral.
I think the point that got me was the ability to say this is going to be your final. You know, if I want this mediator and you want this mediator, and you can't agree, then this body has the ability to say, no, we're going to use this one, which could be pretty significant. I guess that's what caught my eye.
They've always been a part of the fact-finding and the mediation, fact-finding, arbitration process.
Okay.
And, the preference is if the parties can agree. However, if the parties don't agree, the question at any of these stages is what do we do next? And the
Okay.
courts don't want to decide for us.
All right. I'm going to try to just hit on a few of these because I know there's people waiting. You talked about the Assembly having the ability to provide variance for personnel regulations, but you didn't really amplify on how that would occur. Would that occur as a contract is presented, or would it occur prior to negotiations? How?
I believe the anticipated route would be as the contract is presented, that it is part of the memorandum or it's part of the discussion that on these work rules we're varying from 330 blank, blank,
So
blank.
notwithstanding language issue, okay. One of the other questions or concerns I have is further delineation of the managed competition. What does that really mean? You say that it's going to be elaborated further, but basically the ordinance requires you to implement sort of a black box because you don't know what it means. Is there an intent to issue some sort of a document that elaborates on that?
I believe there's an intent.
Okay.
There's a lot of policy. There's also working with purchasing. And quite frankly, I try to stay away from the purchasing department. So, but it is, right now, I think in this ordinance, it's a placeholder.
Well,
People want managed competition. They want to see it. We've had, the administration has told me, a number of people really want this in, and assembly members want it. But what we've got to do is to find out what the program is.
Well, we've tried several times to define with varying results, and it always seems that people have a different understanding. So it strikes me as somewhat dangerous to just explain it with a paragraph when we've tried with pages, I'm looking up there, Jennifer, with limited success in the past.
One of our
Okay.
goals, Ms. Osiander, is going to be, Mr. Chair, is to really get down in depth with the examples that we've seen from other cities where it's been successful. We want to build on the successes of those areas, Seattle and others, where they've had good results and have saved money and delivered services at a high level.
Yeah.
And so that's our goal.
That's fine, but everybody has to know what we're talking about.
Oh,
We have
yeah,
to
no,
use
absolutely.
And I don't think we're there yet, personally.
No, all this does is allow it.
Well-
It doesn't say you have to do it.
The question is, what is it?
That's what we'll be
Yeah.
defining over the next few months.
Okay,
We're going to approach it very carefully.
all right. And then I don't want to belabor, my last thing is, you said you've set citations on these cases to various people.
Yes.
Could you post them or somehow make them available to us? Oh, okay,
Since we're on that topic,
thanks.
and we've covered the additional slides, if you want to take one and hand those out.
So, some of the background on those cases?
Yeah, that's, all the slides that we just used are in there, including the citations. I can provide additional background.
Okay.
We've got a number of sources.
So if I want to read that site, I could get it from you instead of fumbling myself to try to.
I actually have the major ones on my computer. I can send you an electronic copy.
I think it'd be really helpful that the assembly members, if they wanted to, could look up somehow and get that. Okay, Mr. Chair, I reserve to ask questions later, but I'll pass it on now.
I'll come back and get it.
Okay.
Mr. Flynn.
I was curious about some of the latter slides. We talked about the different benefit programs that different bargaining units and different employees have. And the theory behind this is that we'll somehow normalize that for everyone will be roughly the same. What's the process for getting there, other than we just say everyone has to be the same system, on the same system, and then presumably do that? Does that mean that next time you negotiate, we put on the table, here's the benefit package, good luck?
One of the things that we're looking to do is, obviously, we're at a midpoint of a year for most of our benefits. They become effective for a January time period. So over the course of the next few months, propose what can be applied more consistently and focus on where there's the benefits. That's going to go through what's called the Executive Health Care Committee for evaluation, and we're also going to be presenting those as we're forming what's called a joint health care committee to start those conversations with the interested parties of our unions.
I
that
think
participate.
typically what you see in contract language, and a number of other entities here in Alaska have it, where it says the membership will be subscribed to the healthcare benefit plan of the employer, or some other definition, ODS, EBMS, as offered with a contribution of X dollars. So it's the dollar contribution is what's in flux in that contract. But, you know, it is, health plans vary year to year. You know, what's going to be in the health plan, what's out, and largely that's directed by what's in the lower 48 and what's offered. It's not something that we control here. It is something controlled by actuaries across the country. So to lock each contract in, well, this is your health plan for the next 3 years, we're not going to change anything, is pretty ineffective.
Let me just step back. I think one of the questions, what Pat may be referring to, is the programs itself. How many options? What's the best option? Is that it's a relative? You think about maybe the school district, or maybe even the Alaska University of Alaska system. They have a standard option, and it takes into consideration where there's a competitive program. You look at your peer groups, see what's a standard competitive program, and that's where we're going to look to model. It may be, I'm just going to say an example, 2 plans, 3 plans, something that is more standard, it's competitive, it's matching with our peer groups, and it's minimizing, 13 different options that are in a life insurance program. Not specifically related to the internals of the benefit piece.
On the alignment of holidays, I mean, obviously, a lot of municipal workers work, I guess we'll call it standard shift, Monday to Friday, 8 to 5-ish. But a lot also work irregular shifts. How do you envision that working? If we decide that every 4th Thursday of every November is every employee's Thanksgiving, and yet it snows, I mean, how do you?
We do that today.
Right.
So
And
it's not changing the fact of that today.
so does that mean that if you're a cop and you're on duty on the 4th Thursday of November, does that mean your Thanksgiving is a different day, or is that day you get extra pay for it because you're working?
What this is referring to is a recognized holiday,
Mhm.
that the municipality recognizes standard holidays. The difference could be how you observe those holidays. That could be different based off of your business needs.
So in other words, we're not saying everyone has the same day off, we're saying everyone gets the same number of days off. And then my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong here, the Fair Labor Standards Act allows for a certain amount of unpaid overtime. Is that correct? Or straight time overtime as opposed to time and a half overtime?
The Fair Labor Standards Act is a little bit different from what a lot of people are used to under the state law. The state law is 8 hours a day. Fair Labor Standards Act for most people is 40 hours a week, and that's where our non-rep employees are. You can have 410s, you can work 16 in one day. You don't hit overtime until you hit 40, and it's a little bit different for police and fire. There's because of the Kelly shifts and the other shifts, but I think police officers, it's 46 or 47 hours in a week before they hit overtime under FLSA.
So, are we setting up, if we decide that we're going to strictly adhere to FLSA, are we setting up a scenario where some employees, say non-police and fire, get overtime after 40 hours, but police and fire don't?
That's the system we're under right now.
You said we're in a state system.
No, we're not under the state system.
We're out of.
Yeah, we are, it's one of those weird things. We are under federal wage and hour, but for the most part, we follow state on everything else. But wage and hour, the state exempted itself, and it's municipalities from it, and so we're just subject to federal.
But under the current contracts, everybody gets overtime after 40 hours a week.
Under the current contracts with police and fire, the Kelly shift, overtime comes in at, how many hours? The Kelly shift's based on a 14-day period, and then we also have a true-up. It is a real mess, but generally speaking, police are still getting it over 40 and over the shift on a callback, a day not worked. There's a lot of different overtimes going on in there. With fire, there's a little bit of that, but it's primarily on the Kelly shift, because, I mean, they work 24-hour shifts. They don't get 16 hours.
Right, I
overtime
understand.
on that.
So, just so maybe I need to ask this a little more carefully, then I'll stop, Mr. Chairman. When we enact this as written, there will be circumstances where people who are currently getting overtime would no longer get overtime.
Yes, there would be those situations. And one thing that, might be room for some clarification, and certainly would be room for in 330 or negotiations. But there are a number of things that look and smell like overtime, but aren't necessarily overtime.